Who really controlled America in 1905? In 1905, America looked free. Elections were held. The flag waved. Factories roared with progress, but behind closed doors, behind locked boardrooms, behind men whose names were never on ballots. America was already owned. Not by the president, not by Congress, not by the people. Tonight, we're uncovering who really controlled America in 1905 and why most Americans never realized it. At the dawn of the 20th century, the United States was exploding. Railroads stitched the nation together. Steel cities rose from dirt. Oil, coal, and electricity reshaped daily life. Newspapers called it progress. Politicians called it prosperity. But for millions of Americans, life felt very, very different. Wages were low, hours were endless, accidents were common, and poverty sat right next to unimaginable wealth. Because by 1905, power had shifted quietly into the hands of a small, invisible elite. On paper, America was a democracy, but in the reality, votes were cheap, politicians were loyal to donors, laws were written by those who paid for them. Corporations didn't lobby quietly. They openly funded campaigns, owned newspapers, and controlled courts. If a law threatened profits, it simply never passed. And if someone stood in the way, they were crushed. By 1905, fewer than 1% of Americans controlled most of the nation's wealth. Steel, oil, railroads, banks. Entire industries were monopolized. These men were called captains of the industry. But working Americans had another name for them, robber barons. They didn't compete. They eliminated competition. They didn't negotiate. They dictated terms. They didn't build systems. They controlled choke points. If you needed steel, rail transport, fuel, or credit, you went through them. There was no alternative. Nothing mattered more in 1905 than railroads. Railroads decided which towns lived, which towns died, which businesses survived, which failed. Rates were manipulated in secret. Friends got discounts. Enemies were crushed by impossible fees. A single railroad decision could destroy an entire community overnight, and railroad executives knew it. They weren't just businessmen, they were kingmakers. Behind every railroad, factory, and corporation stood the banks. Money decided everything: who expanded, who collapsed, who survived a recession. In 1905, banking wasn't regulated. There was no safety net, no protection for ordinary people. A few powerful financiers controlled credit for the entire nation. When they pulled money out of the system, the panic followed. Businesses closed, workers were fired, families starved, and the men at the top, they waited, then bought everything cheaper. For workers, 1905 America was brutal. 12-hour days were normal, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. Children worked in factories. Men died in mines. Women stitched clothing behind locked doors. If you complained, you were fired. If you organized, you were blacklisted. If you protested, violence followed. Private security forces, hired by corporations, broke strikes with guns. the law rarely intervened. Because the law answered to money. By 1905, newspapers didn't just report news, they created reality. Owned by wealthy interests, they framed strikes as riots, workers as radicals, and corporate leaders as saviors of the nation. Stories that threatened powerful men simply didn't run. Public opinion was engineered. Americans believed they were informed. They were not. They were managed. Congressmen were cheap. Judges were cheaper. Corporations openly funded campaigns, dinners, vacations, even outright bribes. Laws protecting workers died quietly in committee. Antitrust laws existed, but were rarely enforced. And when they were, the powerful adapted faster than the law. They always did. But by 1905, something dangerous was happening. The public was waking up. Journalists began exposing corruption. Workers began organizing. Reformers began asking questions no one wanted answered. Why were a few men so powerful? Why was poverty growing alongside wealth? Why did democracy feel fake? The system was starting to shake. So who really controlled America in 1905? Not voters, not workers, not even the president. America was controlled by industrial monopolies, financial elites, railroad kings, corporate-controlled media, bought politicians. It wasn't a conspiracy. It was business as usual. And it worked. Until it didn't. The America of 1905 wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. A nation powered by labor, ruled by wealth, and protected by silence. The question isn't whether America was controlled in 1905. The real question is, how much has really changed today?